Welcome to Startup Success, the podcast for startup founders and investors. Here you'll find stories of success from others in the trenches as they work to scale some of the fastest growing startups in the world. Stories that will help you in your own journey. Startup Success starts now.
Welcome to Startup Success. Today we have Amy Volas in studio, who is the founder and CEO of Avenue Talent Partners. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Weird pause.
I know that was
so
odd.
Thank you.
Well, I'm excited to speak with you because this is an area that's so important for startups, but not an area that most founders know much about. And we're going to talk about recruiting and hiring. But first, if you could give everybody an overview of Avenue Talent Partners, I think that would be helpful to kind of set the stage for what you're up to in your background.
Sure. Thank you. So sales is my first business love. I go back way longer than I care to admit. So I've been around for a while. I've sold both products and services. I also have been part of startups that had exits. One was an IPO, another was an acquisition. And I've been part of startups that did nothing. And one of the interesting things through my trials and tribulations, and the industry that I was always in was HR tech, selling products and services to folks trying to figure out hiring, was the fact that there are many common themes, regardless of the kind of company, where the company is located, how big or small a company may be. And I have a hard time finding the right person for my business, for where I am in my business, for the work that's required to do this well. And, oh, by the way, I have a really hard time keeping them as well. And that's been a story for the ages. And so when I think about that, and I think about my sales career, and I think about the fact that I saw another theme with my startup founders, which I love you all. If you're listening, I love you. I'm here to help you. So is Kate. We come waving the white flag. But the big thing here is, you know what you know really, really well. But when it comes to hiring sales and CS leaders, that's a different language. And my job, and why I created Avenue Talent Partners 7.5 years ago, is to help founders get out of their own way, to reduce the margin for error, to get it right the first time around, because the turnover odds and what the cost is and what that looks like, that's the stuff that my nightmares are made of. And I love this ecosystem and I want to make it better. And so that is what ATP, so Avenue Talent Partners, ATP, is here to do. We are an executive search firm. We focus on the earlier side of the startup equation. So anywhere between $1 million to $25 million in ARR, SaaS only. That takes us through late seed through B round, if I had to round it out. And our commitment and our focus is working with founders that care deeply about getting it right, or they haven't gotten it right and they're reeling from that mishire and they're trying to pick up the pieces to get it right now. So that is my jam. That is what we do every day. And I'm excited to break this all down together. So
awesome.
Thanks, Kate.
So well said. You put that together so well. And I like that you have a specific niche that you that you kind of focus on, because I think that's important. So tell us, if you had your ideal scenario, how would you work with a startup and founder? Walk us through the process, because I don't think everyone's clear on what the process ideally should look like. It's much more chaotic typically.
It is. And it's not one-sized, which I think is one of the first missteps that people take, is it's just this thing that you do and it looks and acts and feels the same. The very first step of success is, you need help. And so I think sometimes it's scary to admit to ourselves, let alone to anybody else, that we're in over our head, that maybe we've made some fumbles along the way. And there's no shame in that game at all. And so the first step of success for me is, you need help, or you know that you care deeply about this and you just don't have time and you want to get it right. And so we have a manifesto here at ATP. And part of that manifesto is, we can't care more about scaling and growing and hiring for your business than you do. So that's like step one. And the same, is said for the candidates that we work with as well. I can't care more about your career than you do. And if we do, then that's a real big signal that we have a problem. We need to have a conversation. So that's the first piece. The second piece is that there is a commitment to the intentionality that is required to do the hiring process well. And so back to that statement that I made earlier, Kate, in terms of there are lots of different shades of gray when it comes to a VP of sales or a VP of CS or a CS or sales leader. What is the right shade for you? And that intentionality of slowing down. So I live and die by slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so I don't like to use the process as a way of quantifying or qualifying what good will look like together, because what that will do is if you do that, you're wasting everybody's time. You're creating a bad candidate experience. Experience matters, especially in this digital age. And even though it may be a candidate that you're not interested in, that candidate has legs. And what that means is they know people. They could become somebody that could hire you one day. They could be somebody that might buy something from you one day. They could be somebody that invests in you one day. So why be so short-sighted? So I care a lot about those building blocks initially. And then we start thinking about architecting a hiring process that meets the founders that we work with where they are, keeping true to our process that we know that works, but marrying some of those things together to create something that's going to reduce that margin for error, be super efficient, and help them get it right. So
excellent.
That's how I think about it.
I like how you touched on process, which is so important for everybody's time, but then also candidate experience, which I don't hear a lot of people in your space talk about, but it makes so much sense. It's got to be a focus based on, how you just explained that. So that being said, what kind of candidates are you typically looking for startups versus, some of these larger established companies? Are there some certain attributes that kind of always stand out?
So I don't work with the larger companies, so it's hard for me to answer that because I don't even think about that side. I think, but what I do deal with, and I'm one of those rare birds that is ambidextrous, meaning in my own sales career, I had great success at Yahoo. And then I went and I was employee number 20 something at Indeed. And I did both of those very well, why am I bringing that up? That actually answers your question. What I care about is forget about stage even for a second. What is the work that is required right now to do this well? And what does it start looking like in the near future? I don't want your vision for 50 years from now because you know what? So much is going to be different and it's going to change and nobody has a crystal ball. But I do care about when you think about why this role exists and what it is here to do, what does that look like? And that's a very big revealing moment in the conversation, in the sense that if you haven't really considered it and you're just thinking, we need a sales leader, you're already putting yourself at a disadvantage, in my opinion, because not all sales leaders are created equal. And a big company versus a small company person, they both are valuable. They both are smart. They both do good work. It's that the work is different. So I'll give you an example. We're on a search right now for a founder that hired somebody 18 months ago. It didn't work out. And she's reeling. She's like, wow, I don't want to go through this again. They've already tallied up how much it's cost them thus far. And we're already over $3 million. So it's an expensive proposition. And when I think about why that happened and we talk about that, there was a seduction around this person comes from a company that I want to be like in the future. And so let's go hire that person because they're going to have a playbook and they're going to know what they're doing and they're going to know our industry and they're going to have a Rolodex. And the thing is, all of that might be true, but where you are and what's going on in your business and how you can deliver and what you're offering, that's not congruent. And so what ended up happening is this person gets hired from this big company, and the things that they're prioritizing and their strategy and what they put in motion is all big company minutia stuff that slows a startup down, that held the startup back, that is a big contributing factor to why there's a $3 million balance in counting from a cleanup perspective. It didn't mean that person was bad. It means that they didn't know any better. And I think what happens is people get so excited about startups. They're so sexy and I want an exit and it's awesome and blah, 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 blah. To get to that exit, the cards are stacked against you that you're even going to see it. But the true word of build, and so many people will tell me if they're coming from a big company, ooh, I want to be in a startup. I break it down. Why? I'm a builder. I want to build something. I like building things. What was the last thing that you built? Well, I built this new process for what we did. How did you build it? Well, I had this enablement team over here. I had this marketing team over here. I had this over here. And the reasons or the drivers of why that existed, they don't even look, feel, smell anything like what's happening over here. And so when you start breaking it down, it's like, it sounds sexy. It is a build. The build is different. So it's like if you and I want to build a yurt and this person's used to building a mansion, that's a whole different deal. A yurt doesn't even have a real roof.
Right.
You know,
right.
You got to use different tools. So it's that I think people don't stop and breathe and digest and think about. That was a very long, drawn out answer to your very short question. But for those listening, I hope this is helpful. It was a super helpful
answer because I just went through this with a colleague. Like you said, she was far along at a much later stage startup. And when she came in and helped this startup, a lot was already set in place. And she was just recruited to a seed stage startup. And she was calling me saying, there's no playbook. They have no territories. They have no process. And she quit. And she was the wrong person, like you said, not because she was bad and she didn't have the skills. She just has later stage different skills. And so if this founder had, really kind of honed in on what they really needed, that could have all been prevented. And so is that what you do with founders as a first step, is kind of really narrow down into what they need?
Yes. Short answer, yes. The backdrop of what made me very successful in my sales career. When I think about my sales career, I'm going to do a little shameless brag moment for a second. I've sold over $100 million in revenue in my sales career. And that wasn't through partnerships. That wasn't through anything else but my own sweat equity. And when I think about why, the number one thing that made me really successful was zipping my lip and understanding what the deal was, right? And so that same methodology, it's not even a methodology, I think it's a way of life and a mindset, but that same desire to listen before I ever say, well, this is what you're going to do, and this is what you need, and this is why, is to understand. So we go through a really rigorous, very thorough discovery process before the party even gets started. And so for me, that's where it starts. I think in addition to that, there are a lot of things that need to happen at the same time. So I joke with my customers, I play a lot of different roles. I'm one part therapist, I'm one part coach, I'm one part consultant, I'm one part sales expert, and I'm one part recruiter. And sometimes I'm HR and the law. It depends on what's happening, where those different hats are worn. And sometimes I feel like I'm a million people in one because those hats are worn in rapid succession in the same conversation. And so I think Drift back in the day had a wonderful tagline that I've totally ripped off and I love. I try to meet people where they are, because the startup journey, it's hard. Being a founder is hard. It's a thankless, lonely job a lot of the time. And even though you have to put a brave face on for your investors, for your advisors, for your team, for everybody, I try to create a safe space where you don't have to have all the answers, especially when it comes to something so important as the person that's going to be driving revenue for your company. Let's talk about it. And part of me also is a lovely challenger of, I hear what you're saying. Here's why that's not going to work for you. And so it's that ability to listen and then respond with a different point of view or a course of action or a suggestion, depending on what their situation is, and knowing that This isn't order taking. This isn't let me throw up enough spaghetti up against the wall to my network. I mean, sure, I've got a huge network. I'm the only executive search firm owner that I know that has a LinkedIn top sales voice. I've been in the game for almost 30 years. Yeah, I know a lot of people. Doesn't mean anything until it means something. And the only way that I know what it means is if I spend time peeling back those layers to confirm or deny what it is that you need. And most importantly, let's take a page out of Simon Sinek's book, why you need it.
I love it. And I love how you broke down all the different hats you have to wear in the process. So, okay, you've gone through the process. Let's talk about salespeople because they're very hard to get them to commit. They're super hard to get that. It's hard to get that yes. So I know so many founders listening, you've decided on a candidate and then kind of sometimes a lot of more of the hard work begins. Talk us through that, like what you recommend for, landing these people.
Just like in sales. So I've said this so many times and I'm writing a book right now and this is part of it. So founders, there will be a book for you that talks about a lot of this stuff. But sales and recruiting, those two things are not dissimilar. In fact, they're real similar. And I think it's what makes me great for the work that I do. But when I think about that and I think about why that is, the very best deals that don't churn, that go quickly, that seem nothing's easy. I'm air quoting the word easy for anybody listening and not watching. It's because you did the work up front to understand your ICP like the back of your hand. And when you do that, you show up in an open way to confirm or deny together. Because when you do that, you achieve alignment, or it becomes very easy to spot that you are out of alignment. And when you have that, you don't have to sell anybody on anything.
Interesting. That was not the answer I was expecting. But
it usually isn't, Kate. Welcome to the Amy Volas show. I mean, ask my husband. He says this all the time. Like,
it makes so much sense, but I thought equity and all these things, but alignment. I mean, it makes perfect sense. And maybe if you can't get to that alignment with the candidate that you thought, maybe that's a big red flag right there, right?
Well, if you're not aligned, I've said this before, this is my saying, I'm going to take credit for it. Alignment is the new loyalty for our customers, for our team members. If we are not, think about it, Kate, in your life, whenever you've been out of whack with somebody, out of alignment, do you feel like you are endeared to them? Do you feel like you want to go through the hard work with them? I mean, this is personal and professional. If I'm not aligned, I don't want to be there. It's called a no for me. Why would this be any different? And I think, so founders that are listening to this, I want to unravel some advice that you've received through the years. Your job is not to sell somebody on your role, on your company. Your job is to be authentic about what the work is, about why you exist, about what you're proud of, about what your mission is, and to orchestrate a hiring process that gives you space to be able to share the good and the not so good, because guess what? People are going to find out about it anyway, and that's going to be crazy and icky and expensive. And giving the other person space to understand what they need to understand, that you can seek what's important to them. What do they want to do? So just because somebody says, I went to President's Club, if we're talking about reps, I went to President's Club 10 times. I'm at the top 1%. Top 1% of what? And what did you actually have to do? And by the way, the last 10 to 14 years, you didn't have to be that good in sales to have good outcomes. And so if you are a company that needs a full cycle, you don't have a lot of resources, and they have to get after it to truly epitomize the word build, and you hire a hotshot person that talks about all their stats and you don't know how they did it, then you hire them and all of a sudden they're like, where are all my inbound leads at? And you're like, wait, inbound? We're talking about outbound. So you want to hold space for not just what's important for you, you want to take that selling hat off and put the alignment hat on. And the alignment hat on is we can have open conversation. We can be transparent with each other. My job in the interview process is to confirm or deny alignment. And that is the big price tag that my clients pay for my work. Is I'm not wasting anybody's time. If all of a sudden I talk to somebody in my network or out of my network and they look like, God on earth, that's great. I'm excited, but I'm going to temper my happy eyes and ears, and I'm going to understand. And many times we heard you say X, Y, and Z. And actually we are over here with B, D, and E. And those two things are not the same, and it doesn't make sense. Do you know how many times candidates are like, thank you. Thank you for not wasting my time. And my clients are like, thank you. Thank you for not wasting my time. When that happens, you don't have to sell. It just doesn't have to be. Now, do you have to be gracious? Yes. Do you have to show up in a way that's not a jerk? Of course. Do you have to talk about things that you're excited about? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean you sweep the hard under the rug, because the hard will come back and it is a powerful boomerang that'll hit you in the head, and it doesn't feel good if you're just busy selling a candidate on something. That's how you get to yes together.
I love that. There's occasionally on these shows, somebody shares something, and I just have to say to founders listening, I hope you caught that, because I've worked at so many startups. I've, interacted with so many CEO and founders, and when things are out of alignment, whether it's sales, hiring, marketing, anything, you're absolutely right on that. Do you have to have a lot of hard conversations with some of your founder clients, or do you sometimes? But I'm sure that's where you bring a lot of value, because I'm sure then looking back, those hard conversations is where having you involved in the process really paid off.
Well, it's like what we were saying before. I know my ICP like the back of my hand. I know the kind of founder where I can really do what they need me to do. And I know it's kind of like the Kenny Rogers song, The Gambler. I know when to hold them and I know when to fold them. And there are founders that are well-intentioned, but they're not going to be good for me. And I will be the first person to say, I'm not your right resource. It's going to feel too hard for you. It's going to require more time than you want. And look, I'll be here if you need me in the future, but I'm going to take a time out because of these reasons. And you may want to consider the solution instead. Or many times I'll have very well-intentioned founders come my way and say, oh, I'm ready for a CRO, and they have 1 million in ARR. You're not. And I will gracefully and politely say, let me help you avoid a lot of money and time spent on something you don't need right now. So I think it's that, but because I tend to seek alignment myself, and I know how I show up, and I know what our process is, and I know what success mutually together looks like. It's not like when you talk to me as a founder, we have a half an hour conversation and say, great, give me your job order and let's do this. We are an executive search firm. That means it's retained. That means it's exclusive. You need to feel real good about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and vice versa, because we're in it together. It is that true meaning of the word partnership. And so if somebody kind of does a drive-by on me and is like, where are all my people at? That's not going to be probably the right thing for what I do. And so to your point, Kate, the hard conversations tend to materialize pretty quickly of, this is what you get when you work with avenuetalentpartners.com. And it's not just me that's involved in the search. So yes, it's my company. We only work with a handful of founders at a time so that we can do everything that I'm saying, so that we can deliver an incredible experience for them as well as the candidate on their behalf. Some founders could give two rips about that. And I rather know, it's kind of like what I just said now. I rather know now than later, because it only gets harder later. And thankfully, whatever happened in whatever part of my DNA when I was in the womb that has materialized in my brain, I'm not afraid of having a tough conversation when it's the right conversation to have, because it makes sense.
This is great. And all your answers, you keep pointing out and highlighting things that founders really need to have top of mind when hiring and recruiting. So you've shared a lot of advice, but we always wrap up the show with just any general advice that you would share with founders, either, on your own founding journey with your own firm or through your experiences with working with them. It's one of our most popular questions and answers on the show. If you wouldn't mind closing with that.
My best advice is it's hard. And it's a roller coaster ride. And the highs are the highest of the high. That is the connective tissue that helps you get through the lowest of the lows. And I know some people that are probably listening to this are feeling some of those low moments. It is one of my hardest things that I struggle with as well to this day, is asking for help. And the best thing that you can do is know when it's time to ask for help and then to lean into that. Because we don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. And if you're going to ask for help and you're listening to people outside of yourself, make sure they are the right people, meaning they have competency in the real thing that you're going through, that they're not just pontificating, that they have seen this story before, that they have endured that struggle before, and they've come out better for it, and they can help you. That is the very best advice that I can give to anybody that's listening to this.
That's great. Thank you. So Amy, if somebody wants to find more information about Avenue Talent Partners, where do they go?
They can go to avenuetalentpartners.com. We will be there with wide open, welcoming, non-judgmental arms. The hotline is always on if you need it. And also LinkedIn, I share a lot of content about a lot of these things. And so my LinkedIn is Amy Volas. I think I'm the only one that is Amy Volas, unless it's the artist formerly known as Amy impersonating me. I'm not sure. But I'm there, and I open my arms to anybody that'd like to have a conversation about any of the stuff that we've talked about. So thank you, Kate, so much.
Thank you, Amy. It's
awesome.
always fun to speak with people who know you're so knowledgeable, so passionate, and just you have such a great attitude about this. So thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Me too.
You've been listening to Startup Success. To make sure you don't miss out on future episodes, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. Like what you hear? Tap the number of stars you think the show deserves in Apple Podcasts. For more tools and resources for your own startup success, check out burklandassociates.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.